people, because I think there's quite a wide distribution of knowledge here. Some people know a lot. Some people think they know a lot. Some people don't know very much at all. But these things
Mhm.
are ubiquitous. They're all over in the food supply. So let's just start basic. What are seed oils,
Sure.
and what should people know about them on a very basic level?
Yeah, seed oils are pretty much exactly what they sound like. It's oil from seeds, and it sounds innocuous, but most seeds, oil seeds, as they're called in the industry, the types of seeds from which seed oils are derived, do not actually have a ton of oil in each individual seed. Extracting and aggregating the oil requires a vast quantity of input seeds.
Mm-hmm.
For example, corn oil, which is a common seed oil, requires several dozen bushels of corn or ears, sorry, of corn to make 1 tablespoon of corn oil.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, with sunflower oil, you require pounds and pounds of sunflower seeds to get 1 tablespoon of seed oil, so on and so forth. And so the fact that the seeds don't have that much oil in them is is why, in order to get at these oils, a whole host of industrial processing
Mm-hmm.
is required and implemented.
Yeah.
So
So
that
basically,
means,
you need a very large mass of starting material, and then you need to squeeze. You need to come up with mechanisms that literally like kind of squeeze or pull that oil
yeah,
out, so it can be concentrated.
yeah, and then that process, there's a whole bunch of refining steps because that's like a very artificial thing to go do. So there's a whole bunch of refining steps, deodorizing and bleaching and purifying and all sorts of chemically induced or chemically moderated steps. And then the end result is the seed oils, also called vegetable oils, or more commonly called vegetable oils, that are ubiquitous in the American diet. So the first thing to know, or I guess the second thing to know about seed oils, is because of the technology required to produce them, they are an inherently non-traditional, or in other words, artificial food,
Mhm.
according to like the definition that we went over in the
Yeah,
beginning,
because
which is
before industrial technology was developed, there's no way
no.
people could possibly do this.
Correct. And so obviously there are oils, right? Olive oil
Mhm.
exists, but olive oil is not a seed oil because the olive is a fruit. And so
Yeah.
the oil from an olive comes from the flesh, which is the fruit of the olive. Similarly, avocado oil comes from the green part, the fruit
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
avocado, um, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So not all oils that are derived from plants are seed oils, but the vast majority of the oils that are consumed, the commodity oils, vegetable oils, whatever you want to call them, are derived from seeds. They are the seed oils that we're talking about. And the third thing worth noting about them is that they now represent about 20%, 20 to 25% of the daily caloric intake of the average American,
Mhm.
which is insane because this is, again, a thing that did not exist
Yeah.
150 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, for traditional peoples, pre-industrialization, I mean, even early industrialization, I'm not sure there would have been a population of people anywhere on the planet in history up until very recently that consumed one thing as, that much of their diet.
Certainly one novel thing, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
there are people always cherry pick some tribe that, oh, they only subsist on that weird nut from some tree and like
yeah, yeah.
eyeballs or something. Whatever. Someone will cherry pick a tribe. Um, but certainly 25% of the caloric intake is as much, if not more, than any other individual food item that people eat.
Hmm.
I'm pretty confident that's more than the calories people obtain from meat, for example. It's up there with the calories people obtain from sugar or bread or any other common ingredient.
Hmm.
And the thing about seed oils, of course, is that that is they are the most widely consumed artificial ingredient. Talking about traditional foods, seed oils, as bad as they are, what makes them so terribly pervasive and harmful and whatever is simply that they're consumed in that quantity. There are plenty of artificial ingredients. There's high fructose corn syrup, there's guar gum and freaking carrageenan and soy protein isolate and modified potato starch and red 40, and there's pesticides and preservatives and there's citric acid. There's all those things that you see on ingredient labels that are like, what the hell's that? None of them come close to being consumed in the quantities that seed oils do.
Hmm.
How like a pack of Skittles is what, like a milligram of red 40, you know? Whereas your common serving of French fries at McDonald's will have tablespoons of seed oils. So simply the quantity alone is one of the reasons that makes seed oils unique among all processed
Hmm.
food
Hmm.
ingredients, not only for
Yeah,
their particularly insidious effects, but because of how
yeah,
damn much we eat.
yeah. And I mean, and one of the things I like to do when I think about a subject like this, or when I'm talking to people about it, is um, there's two things I like to do to sort of anchor my thinking. So one is just, and this is sort of like a saying from the world of pharmacology and pharmacotherapy. The dose is often what makes the poison.
Mhm.
Just about anything you can think of will become bad for you if it's sufficiently concentrated. So there are so many examples. There's just many examples of this. Vitamin
Salt,
A, your body needs
water.
vitamin A,
Yep.
but at some point, if you overconsume vitamin A, it can start causing you serious problems.
Right.
So you should automatically be at least somewhat skeptical or interested to know more about anything that's been concentrated to this degree.
Right. It's an entire, like, there's no natural diet that could ever get you a quantity of the oils from seeds that you get
Mhm,
with seed oils, right? You'd have
mhm,
to eat, again, dozens of ears of corn. No
mhm.
one's eating dozens of ears of corn.
Yeah,
Like, you're
every
just not
meal.
doing that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's I would say, to answer the original question here, that is the basic understanding of seed oils. As far as why they're particularly bad, I mean, or mechanistically how they're bad, rather, like what they actually do. If you want me to get into that, we can, but that's a whole separate thing. But yeah, the summary from this section of the lecture, I suppose, is that seed oils are inherently artificial. Industrial technology is required to make them. They are a concentrated thing from some natural product, but industrially concentrated, and they are present in uh, far more abundant quantities in our diet than ever before. And they are the most widely consumed processed artificial food ingredient.
Mhm. And before we go into sort of what's in them and some of the metabolism and physiology stuff here,
Yeah.
I want to give one more anchor point for people because I always like to put these things in sort of evolutionary or ecological terms to help me
Mhm.
think about them when I'm first starting to evaluate, what do I think about different things. You said something that was interesting that I want to unpack, which is you made the distinction between seed oils, where you're, squeezing or extracting the oil from seeds, versus
Mhm.
things like avocado or olive oil, where the oil is coming from the fruit
Mhm.
of the plant. And that's a fundamental distinction because, with certain species specific exceptions, in general, plants want animals to eat the fruit, and that's why the fruit is composed in the way it has evolved to be made out of the sugars and things that it's made out of. It's
Very
trying to
good.
incentivize animals and creatures to eat it. And
Mhm.
in general, they don't want their seeds to be eaten. So they actually put stuff in the seeds, including a physical shell that provides a
Mhm.
physical barrier, as well as things that are chemical deterrents inside the seed that they're trying to dissuade most
Yeah.
organisms from eating the seeds. And that's worth knowing because that a priori, but without knowing anything else, that tells you that you're much more. It's much more likely that something like a fruit will be
Yeah.
good or for your body, or that you've adapted to it, than something like a seed.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Interestingly enough, the only three foods in nature that are actually designed to be food, as in for the consumption by another or even the same species, is the fruit, milk, and honey.
Hmm.
No other aspect of biology is designed to be
Mhm.
food.
Yeah, like
Like the
a cow
plant
is
does
not
not want to
making
lose.
muscle for the purpose of being eaten.
Yeah, no cows don't grow like thigh muscles so that like a wolf can eat them, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
grow thigh muscles so they can walk around.
yeah,
But cows do make milk for the purpose of it being fed to another
yeah,
individual organism, namely, obviously, another cow. But whatever. We don't need to get into
yeah.
vegan
And then
revision
fruit makes
apology
sense
here.
because the plants want to get pollinated and spread around
Yeah,
that way. But what about honey? I don't know about that one. Why is
honey is milk for bees.
I see?
Oh, same
Okay,
thing. Yeah.
okay.
It is food for the larva of the new generation of
Mm,
bees.
I see.
Um, so it's food for someone. Whether or not it was designed to be food for you is a more restrictive
Yeah,
categorization, but it
yeah,
was certainly
yeah.
designed to be food for something. Um, but nothing else. Plants need their leaves. Plants need their seeds. Animals obviously want to keep their bodily integrity intact.
Mhm.
And so that literally leaves milk, honey, and fruit. It's very
Hmm,
interesting.
hmm. So okay, so we talked about like what seed oils are, where they come from. I don't think we need to go too much more into that, although there's some other aspects of that we might go into later. But now
Right.
let's talk about like what is in this oil. What is it made
Yeah,
out of, and what is it actually doing biologically?
sure. So oils, as commonly understood, can contain fatty acids. It's a bunch of fatty
Mhm.
acids linked to a glycerol molecule, and a glycerol molecule has like ports, if you will, to plug in three fatty acids. And a fatty acid is a long chain of carbons with a bunch of hydrogens all around it.
Mhm.
And They can be different lengths. They can have different number of carbons relative to the different number of hydrogens, but fundamentally it's carbons and hydrogens stuck around. And they plug into these glycerol molecules, and that's called a triglyceride, which people may be familiar with, like tri meaning three, of course. And that is the fundamental component of an oil. Um, so these fatty acids come in three types. They are saturated, which is the highest number of hydrogens per, carbon that you could possibly have in that configuration. Monounsaturated, meaning there's one fewer hydrogen than theoretically possible.
Hmm.
And then there's polyunsaturated, which means there's two or more fewer hydrogens than theoretically could fill that molecule. And so different fats naturally contain different compositions of those types of fatty acids. And so, of course, within each category of fatty acids, there's different types of those fatty acids, but we don't really, I think, need to get into that. So the debate is, of course, between saturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, or sorry, saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. Pretty much all animal fats, especially all mammal fats that we've ever consumed, are very high in saturated and monounsaturated fats.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Pretty much most fruit oils, like olive oil and avocado oil, are high in monounsaturated fats, and almost all seed oils are very high, and fish oil in
Hmm.
particular are
Hmm.
high in polyunsaturated fats.
Hmm.
And with the saturation, the degree of saturation is important for a number of reasons. First, it dictates the freezing point or the melting point of the
Hmm.
fat that is constituted by it.
So that's why
People like
butter is solid at room temperature, but olive oil
butter is
or
solid,
yeah.
olive oil is liquid, but it will kind of get cloudy in the fridge.
Yep. Yep.
But vegetable oil, seed oils, polyunsaturated fats will not even remotely solidify in the fridge.
Hmm.
You can put olive oil in the freezer and it'll turn into butter-like consistency, but seed oils will not do that.
Hmm.
Um, and that's because of the polyunsaturation. Basically, it's hard to explain geometrically, but the fewer hydrogens there are in this long chain, the more the molecules can bend around, and so the more wiggly they are,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the more prone they are to being liquid at any given temperature. And so that's important because it comes up with like it corresponds to where and why that oil is found where it is in nature. So mammals are warm-blooded, and our bodies are hot enough to keep saturated fats like liquid.
Hmm.
If your fat in your body were to be hard, like, refrigerated butter, you'd not be able to move very well. So, because we're warm-blooded, our bodies can melt saturated fat, and that makes up most of, by default, the fat that's in our tissues. And
Hmm.
that's true of pretty much all mammals.
Yeah.
Um,
In contrast, an Atlantic salmon is swimming in cold water. They don't necessarily, and they're cold blooded. They don't
Cold-blooded.
really want as much saturated fat to compose their tissues.
No, if an Atlantic salmon's fat were composed of saturated fat, it would be like a frozen block of fish, and it would not be able to wiggle and move and swim. It would drown instantly. Um, so hence why the highly unsaturated fats that are found in cold water fish, hence why they're found there, right?
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
antifreeze. It prevents the fish from literally freezing into a block of butter, while underwater. And so um, you can start to see why different fats show up. It's not random. And then so
Hmm.
seeds, if we think about seeds, well, plants are not warm-blooded. Obviously, they don't generate their own heat. And often they're expected to germinate in the springtime in a place that's like temperate, right? Most of the seed oil plants that we're talking about, those types of seeds are from the plants that are grown in temperate climates. And those seeds need to be able to be flexible
Hmm.
underground in the springtime where it's cold and damp and whatever. And so if they had saturated fat in them, the germination won't be able to happen. The plant will be like frozen solid, basically. So the oils serve a similar kind of antifreeze function in the seeds. And so that should clue the listener into a fundamental incompatibility with humans and seed oils, which is that because we're warm-blooded, we don't need polyunsaturated fats to be able to, move around and exist.
Hmm.
They're not meant for us. They're meant for places that are environments that are much colder, and our internal body temperature is 98.6 degrees, is very warm. Um, so while that may clue you in on like why it's not necessary, the question of like why they're actually harmful
Hmm.
is, easily answered from this. Um, when fats are saturated, fully saturated, those they don't have any breaks, in the molecule or like little bumps in the molecule, and so it's very hard to pull them apart chemically.
Hmm.
As opposed to seed oils, the polyunsaturated fats have all these little breaks in the molecule. It's very easy for them to split apart. And in particular, that splitting apart in this context is called oxidation, which is a chemical reaction that occurs in the, with oxygen in the presence of heat. And the human body, of course, is full of oxygen and also heat. And that breaking apart of this molecule doesn't might not occur in a fish swimming in the Atlantic Ocean, but it very readily will occur
Hmm.
in the human whose internal body temperature is 98.6 degrees. So what we've covered so far is that the saturated fat that's supposed to be in our body fat is very stable at the temperature at which we exist, whereas the polyunsaturated fats are designed to, be act as an antifreeze in environments that are
Hmm.
colder. um, when they are heated and when there's oxygen available, they break apart. And the human body, of course, is hot and there's oxygen. And so introducing seed oils into that environment causes them to break apart. And the resulting molecules are not normal fatty acids. There's a whole class of hundreds of different inflammatory byproducts that could be broken apart. If you just do the geometry, like there's a bunch of different random crap that could come out of these things. And pretty much all of those byproducts are highly inflammatory to human biology. So nature works. It's designed very intelligently, if you will. And when we put things that are meant to be in one place into somewhere else that they're not meant for, all sorts of problems can ensue. And that is, I would say, the root cause of all the ills that seed oils are, blamed for nowadays.
Hmm.